of this whole natural selection thing. And to do that, we're going to back up. We're going to talk about genetic variation. Hey. Do you need someone? Need some people? Okay, so genetic variation, just like let's use our eyes for an example. Some of us have blue eyes, some of us have brown eyes, some of us have in between. We'll ignore them. Where did the blue-eyed allele come from? Just appear out of nowhere? Outer space? Where's the blue-eyed allele come from? Yeah, what about the genes? What happened? What's the ultimate source of all variation in a population? So where did that blue-eyed allele come from?
Cell.
Here, how about I write out the genetic sequence? Brown-eyed sequence is GACCAC. Blue-eyed sequence is GAGCAC. What's that called when it goes from this to this?
Function.
Somebody's sitting on the word and refusing to say it. Starts with an M. Look at the DNA sequence. It starts off like this. It becomes this. What's happened?
I think we all forgot this a lot.
Nope, you can remember this. It's just last semester.
You do remember this?
Starts with an M.
No, you don't. I don't remember.
This is the source of all genetic variation, is the change from one base to another.
No.
You're really close. Think like X-Men or something. What are they?
Mutants.
Yes. So what is this change? Mutation. There we go.
So what?
Wait. This other one can't be a mutation because this is the original. Right? But this is the mutation of the gene that came before that. And that's the mutation of the gene that came before that, right? The ultimate cause of all variation is mutation. Why do some people have blue eyes? Well, there was a blue-eyed allele that's a mutated version of the brown-eyed allele that happened somewhere in the Caucasus Mountains, 20,000 years ago or whatever. They're actually able to track back when it happened. What gets rid of mutation in a population? Does anyone know?
You kill it off.
Yeah, you kill it off. How do you kill it off? The way to kill it off without selection, there might be some sort of selection, but there's a non-selection way as well called genetic drift. We'll spend a whole lab doing genetic drift, or a whole day playing around with genetic drift. No, it's actually pretty fun. It involves art and rolling dice. All right, so just know that genetic variation shows up with mutation and it's removed by genetic drift, just naturally, all the time. These are completely random processes. But you can have less random things in natural selection. So let's imagine you have this island, big old island. You have all these birds. We're going to draw 8 birds just as circles. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, half of these birds, actually no, not half of the birds. Half of the alleles that the birds carry are going to be the red allele. Half of the alleles are going to be the white allele. Okay? So you would expect how many of the birds to be white?
Half.
Red.
If it's 8 and there's
Let's assume for a second that the white allele is recessive. Half of the alleles in the population are the red allele, half of the alleles in the population are the white allele. So how many are going to be white? A quarter, yeah. So in this case, 2 of them are going to be white. How many are going to be solid red? 3/4 if red is dominant, but what if it's incomplete dominance? It's not going to be half. It's going to be, you have to be homozygous dominant, right? So same as if there's 2 homozygous recessive, there's also going to be how many homozygous dominant? I just want to know how many red birds to make. 2? Somebody said 2. Yeah, it's 2, right? The remaining 4, right? The two quarters of them, guys, shh. You remember, we did this all the time. We did Punnett squares and stuff.
I don't remember.
2 quarters of them, shh. 2 quarters of them are going to be carriers, right? And we'll just draw them as carriers here.
Sorry.
Okay, are we all on the same page with that?
No. Sure.
Okay, half of the alleles are red, half of the alleles are white. You would expect, therefore, that about a quarter of the population is going to be completely red, a quarter of the population will be completely white, about half of the population will be a carrier for that allele, right? We all on the same page now? Okay, let's imagine that this is Australia. Off here, a few thousand miles away, is New Zealand. These little tiny, let's just say they're like parakeets or something, they can't fly 1,000 miles to New Zealand. They can barely fly 100 miles without stopping, right? And if they land in the ocean, they're just dead. So, can they fly over to New Zealand? No. Oh, but all of a sudden a big hurricane comes by, a big tropical storm, a once in a 1,000 years sort of event, and there happen to be some parakeets that are flying out, near the ocean, and they get caught up in this tropical storm, and they get blown way over, and they land over here, right? Which 2 do we want to fly over there?
All of them.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8.
7.
Okay, 7's gonna go over. And then we'll have 6 fly over as well. Oh, look at that. Okay, now they're gonna have lots of little parakeet babies. They're gonna take over the whole island, but now all of the island over here is gonna be what? Red. Yeah. Even if you had like, 1 white one and 5 red ones fly over, something like that. The point is that the allele frequency is gonna be different on this island than it was over here on the mainland. Because you start from a small population. This is called a founder effect. You can have a similar sort of thing. I'm just going to graph it this time with a population. It's called, I'm just going to name it actually, bottleneck. Or a genetic bottleneck. Genetic bottlenecks are where you have like this big population, and then some sort of event happens, and it goes really narrow, and then it goes wide again. So this is like time. This is like population size. P-O-P. So for example, if we have a bunch of finches, we have 1 million finches living on this little island somewhere. They're having a great time. There's 1 million of them. The population is pretty stable. But then all of a sudden, there's like a volcanic eruption, right? Their island explodes, lava, ash everywhere, right? Does it kill most of the finches? You bet. 99.9% of them die. Only like 50 survive, something like that, right? And then after the volcanic eruption, the 50 survivors are able to like breed, have more kids, and then the population goes back to normal, right? Yeah?
What if they're like related birds and then
They're gonna have to be related, yeah. So what's the danger of inbreeding? You get less genetic variation, yeah. So the problem with bottlenecks is down here, you're gonna have less diversity. Like up here, you may have had like some purple finches or something like that. 5% of the finches were purple. Well, if you didn't get a purple finch and that 50 that survived, well, the purple finches are all gone, right? That allele's just wiped out completely. So in general, you get less diversity after going through a really narrow thing like that. They estimate that there was a bottleneck in human genetic history at one point. They think the human population was down to like just 2,000 or 3,000 individuals for Homo sapiens. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is speciation. Or before we get speciation, we're going to talk about a natural selection that actually did happen. Let's use, well, these red. Okay, we're going to talk about moths. So here's a little. Okay, so this actually happened. There was a this population of moths were in England right now in like 1800s or so, and there's a wide variety. Yeah.
Wasn't the story about they were like a normal color and then they turned black from?
Yep, exactly. Yep. So there's the variation in the population. Remember, that's one of our requirements for natural selection. In this case, we're just focused on color because that's easy for humans to see and tell. Some of the moths were really dark. Right, we'll just put it like that. Some were really light, and then some were in between.
I just got circles like that.
I'm just dotting it because I can't shade with these, but feel free, if you have a pencil, just shade. Anyway, you have this spectrum, right? Just like, you know, skin color in people, or height. Height in people is a good example too, right? If we were to graph all of the males in this school, we'll skip the male-women debate by just doing males, and we graphed the distribution, would you have more short males, more tall males, or more in the middle males? In the middle. Yeah, if you were to graph these things, they often always follow this nice curve, kind of like that. This is called a bell curve, or a normal distribution, right? You have a lot that are in the middle, and then as you get toward the end, it's pretty rare to be like a 4'6" male, right? It's pretty rare to be like a 7'4" male. Like, it happens, but it's rare. Most people are somewhere in between them. And in fact, that's what happened with these guys. So there's this wide variation. Most of them are kind of in the middle. And there's a wide variety of like trees in England at the time. Some of the trees are pretty light. Some of the trees are pretty dark. If you're on a light tree, is it better to be a dark colored moth or a light colored moth? Yeah. Why do you want to be a light colored moth?
Please. Wait, which kind of tree?
Like a light colored tree.
Oh, they can blend in.
Yeah, you want to blend in, right? So the birds will come and eat you if you're a dark moth on a light tree. But if it's a dark tree,
Dark, whatever you want to do, dark. So. You're gonna stick it.
look at that moth. You can barely even see him. All right, so if it's a dark tree, the birds will eat you if you're light, right? But if you're in between, they'll eat the light and the dark ones, and the medium ones survive. Anyway, just like Robert mentioned, all of a sudden the trees changed pretty quickly. And the reason the trees changed color is because this was around the time of the Industrial Revolution. They figured out, oh, wait a minute, we can burn coal. And the coal can power all sorts of stuff. This is great. They also weren't very efficient at burning coal. It made tons and tons of soot. And you had all this soot and smog covering industrial London, right? What happened to all the light-colored trees?
They went dark.
Yeah, the light-colored trees became dark. Now, all of a sudden, what color would you rather be?
Dark.
Yeah. Now, since all of the trees are darker, it's way worse to be the light-colored moth. So, as a result, the distribution of this graph changes. I won't draw all the moths. I'll put the light and the dark ones. I'll put the medium ones. So instead of being right in the middle, it's really, really bad. The population shifts to something like this. And this actually happened. They tracked it. This is called directional. Oops, Natural selection now favors the dark ones. So there's more and more dark ones in the population. There's less and less light ones in the population. So natural selection can change. The humans aren't going through and killing them, right? But it's the birds that are selecting because the selection pressure is shifted. You could also have it shift like this. You could have it shift something like this. Okay, what's happening here? How's it different than the original normal distribution? It goes what? It goes up where? In the middle? No, on the sides. The extremes go up, yeah. It's better to be light or to be dark, but not in between. What situation might make that true? Where it's better to be like a really dark colored moth or a really light colored moth, but not an in-betweener.
Because if you're like spotted, you don't see either tree.
Yeah, so if you have like a lot of like, if you have like a lot of dark trees and a lot of light trees, but nothing in between, then this is what's gonna happen. Yeah, because it's gonna be worse to be medium. Or what if all the trees turn black, but people are using like white brick or something like that, right? So now all of a sudden there's good habitat for the white ones and for the black ones, but it just sucks to be in the middle, because you're going to get seen no matter what. So these numbers are going down. This is called disruptive selection. And then the final one.
It's a butterfly.
Oh, did I drop bigger? Final one is where the graph, instead of being this big wide one, it's looking more like this. What happened there on that final one? Yeah, there's no light trees or dark trees, they're all medium. So if the soot's like this gray, like medium colored soot, it's just everywhere. If you're a light moth, you're gonna get eaten. If you're a dark moth, you're gonna get eaten. You better be a medium one, right? This is called stabilizing selection. Yeah, true. No, they could become poisonous too. Yeah. So obviously, this is just one little like snapshot of things that could happen. This is directional selection is the one that actually happened. But if this pattern happens, this is called disruptive selection. If this pattern happens, it's called stabilizing selection. Okay, but even then, we're talking about all of these moths are the exact same species. They all breed with each other, right? So at what point do things become separate species? Talk about speciation, and then we're done.
No, but I can do full runs without multiple.
Speciation.
I just like go like this down and then like go and then like.
Okay, I drew a little map here. This is an example I use in my marine bio class. So this is the Atlantic Ocean over here. This is the Pacific Ocean. And there's a species of snail that lives right here in the middle zone. Yeah, it's not a traditional snail with like a curly shell. It's a cowrie shell style snail. So it looks kind of like this, if I can draw it. It's got kind of like a... Yeah, something like that. Anyway, these guys are hanging out. The distribution looks something kind of like this. There's a big population here on the Pacific side, over here on the Atlantic side. But this is millions of years ago, back before Panama existed, yeah? Yeah. Just leave the door open so you can get back in. So this millions of years ago, the water level was a lot higher. These snails are able to like crawl across the ocean and mate with these snails over here. These snails are able to mate over here. So there's what's called gene flow back and forth. Or maybe they mate with like by putting like eggs and sperm into the water, and it's able to flow back and forth between these two areas. The point is that these snails are able to like exchange genes with snails over here at this end of their range. But over the course of a few million years, water levels dropped. This isthmus, or the Panama section of middle Mesoamerica, raises up out of the ground, right? These snails are saltwater snails. They can only survive in the ocean. Are they able to breed with the ones in the Atlantic? No. Yeah, that gene flow gets cut off, right? As soon as they're cut off from each other, are they now new species?
Yeah.
It's a bit up for debate, but most biologists would say no, they're not new species yet. Species? No, but they are on separate like evolutionary paths. So once they stop having gene flow, they're not able to like keep all their alleles the same, and now they can kind of evolve separately as a group. So for example, this one over here, maybe there's a lot of like seagrass over here on this side. And so in order to like camouflage themselves, just over a few million years, they're able to like evolve stripes, right? And maybe over here on this side, there's other selection pressures. They need to run away from hermit crabs, and they live in the sand, so they like get spotted, and they evolve to be a little bit smaller or something like that, right? Just because they look different, does that make them new species? Jackson, phone away, come on. No, right? You can look pretty different and still be the same species. So the real question here, oh, by the way, this is called allopatric speciation.
Oh.
And allopatric here just means like physically separated. Different location. Oh, you want to let him in? John, is that you? Is he asleep? Wake him up. Don't be nice. Oh, that's cold. All right. Wake up, head up. Colt, head up. Head up, head up. Is that your water? Is that your, hey, don't poke him. Colt, head up, head up. Go to the nurse if you need to sleep. Is that your coffee cup over there?
Okay, and there's second to sleep.
You should grab it. Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that. All the time now.
All right. Our general definition of a species these days is just the inability to mate with each other, successfully at least. Different species can't mate or can't successfully create offspring. Donkeys and horses, can they mate?
Yeah.
Sure, but are their offspring able to mate?
Yeah.
I mean, not successfully, right? So mules are sterile for the most part. There are a few exceptions. Yeah.
What about like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals?
What about them?
They're two different species, aren't they?
Or were.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a great point. What about dogs and wolves? Are they different species?
yeah, I believe so.
Technically, no, they're not. So, like, again, the definition of species is a little bit loose. It doesn't really mean there's not possible for any gene flow to go back and forth with like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, but it means that there's not enough gene flow going back and forth to prevent their separate evolutionary trajectories. Right? So eventually we went on our own way and we no longer had any gene flow, and then they all died out. So yeah, we're part of the winning team. All right. Different species can't mate in general. Why can't they mate? What prevents things from successfully mating with other things.
Certain animals have like different reproductive parts.
Yeah, reproductive parts.
Competition.
I'm going to refer to it as the plumbing. The plumbing, it just might not work. It doesn't fit, whatever, right? Not long enough, etc. Like the reproductive parts sometimes aren't compatible. What was the other one? Somebody said?
Competition.
We're not going to include competition because we're concerned about like different species and why they might not mate with each other, as opposed to individuals not being able to mate. What was that?
Like, how well does like a male like a female or vice versa?
Yeah. So actual, like, hold on. There's two components to like attractiveness, right?
Personality.
There's behavior, yeah, personality, behavior. And then there's physical, right? No. I mean, it works in humans. It still works for like animals and stuff too, right? If I'm a little like, I don't know, pileated woodpecker or something like that, and I love female pileated woodpeckers with a red stripe on their head, and I go over to a North American woodpecker and she's got a brown stripe. Am I going to mate with her? No. Yeah. What about this also happens with birds? They do like their mating call, right? And they do their little dance. If I'm a female and some dude walks over and he's got like a totally weird dance and a totally weird call, am I going to let him mate with me? No, right? They got to like match up. So there's all these behaviors and physical like characteristics that might just prevent them from mating with each other. And then finally, the last one is genetics. I hinted at that with like the mules, right? They actually have a different number of chromosomes. So when they mate, they can make an offspring, but then that guy has an odd number of chromosomes and he just can't do mitosis properly. Cool. So as these guys end up on different evolutionary trajectories, you need enough time to go by that one or more of these sort of things evolves, right? So today, if you go and take one of these cowrie shells, and in fact it happens because they dug the Panama Canal, ships use ballast, they dump them over here, whatever. If you drop off one of these stripy shells, is he going to successfully mate with any of those like spotted shelled ones? No. They're going to be like, what are you? You're way too big to be a normal like cowrie, snail, or you look different, or your behavior is weird, or there's chemical cues, or the genetics don't work, whatever. For whatever reason, they're not able to successfully mate. So therefore, they're different species. Okay, we'll stop there.
It's always in this class that I end up
Knocking over stuff. I didn't mean to hide it behind chairs, but there's some stuff that people have left here, like the textbook, the water bottles, you got yours. There's the Lord of the Flies book.
Once this class get out of here.
Well, first period. Green notebook.
We get out of 14, but
Something happened.
something changed. We get out of
Yeah, don't turn it in the box.
No, no, I didn't.
And,
Somebody's geometry book, somebody's notebook.
come back for extension.
General term, let's stick with